There's few of us here, but we will make the best. If I continued with Charles' analogy this morning about football, I'm not sure exactly. He said he was third string, and most teams don't have anybody past a third string quarterback. So I think they run 3 plays and punt when they get down past the third string quarterback. So we're gonna run 3 plays and punt this afternoon in our lesson. Keith called me this morning. He said, do you have something that you can talk about this afternoon? And I said, well, I think I can find something to talk about this afternoon. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about songs in particular, and one song in particular we'll get to in just a minute. But when you think about songs, why we sing, Charles read to us this morning all the verses, I believe, in the New Testament that talked about singing. And it's a very good teaching aid. Most of us probably learned the books of the Bible from a song. If somebody just asked me to, you start trying to memorize them, well, when you put that to music, it's a whole lot easier to memorize. And that's probably how we learned them. We probably learned the names of the apostles through a song. And there's all kinds of children's songs that have very good messages to them, and we use those to teach. And we have the same thing in the songs that we've sung. We've talked about, you think about the songs that we've sung this afternoon even, Sweet Hour of Prayer, talking about that avenue of prayer that we have with God, or bringing in the sheaves. That's probably something that we may not really put that together because we don't see that very often now. The fact that people would go out in the fields and they would harvest, they would cut all the grain and whatever and get it up in bundles, and then they would bring all that in. And that was typically, as we've seen through Old Testament passages and so forth, that was a time of rejoicing. As they brought the harvest in, they would have a feast and they would celebrate that. And so we use those Old Testament stories. We use things that we're familiar with, and people have written poems or songs or whatever to sort of illustrate the teachings of the Bible in songs. And as we sing those, we're able to see the message. It's an encouragement to us to be able to do that. And a lot of the imagery that we see in songs, or a lot of it, are from Old Testament stories. And so I want to look at one of those this afternoon. And if you don't really understand the story, the Old Testament story, or know the Old Testament story, the song may not make a whole lot of sense to you sometimes. Like if you didn't know what bringing in the sheaves were, you would, well, what is that talking about? If you didn't have a clue about what that would be, then it wouldn't really the song wouldn't make a whole lot of sense sometimes. And so I think it's good for us to not only know the story, but then we can see really the application. One of the more common areas that we see songs about is the Israelites as they were leaving Egypt and they were going to the land of promise, going to Canaan. And there's probably several different songs that talk about that. And we see them in those songs. We see things about them being delivered from bondage, and as they go out of Egypt, and as they go into the promised land, and how God provided for them, what things that God did for them. So one of those songs, if you want to turn to 141 in our book, "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah," is based on this time period when the children of Israel were leaving the wilderness and going into the promised land. And so, we see from here the idea that we look at this Old Testament story and we look at this song that's based on that, and it really brings home a lot of principles that we really need to think about. So we're going to have 3 verses to this song, and then we're going to we'll finish up. Verse 1, I'm going to read these and I'll have a few comments about it. Verse 1, guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. So when you think about the verses, or think about this verse in particular, what is he saying here? Well, he talks about, ask God for guidance, number one, but he says pilgrim through this, not pilgrims, not with an S, but pilgrim through this barren land. Well, these people knew that wasn't their home, right? What was their home? Their home was Canaan, right? They're in the wilderness. They're wandering around in the wilderness. He talks about, in Hebrews, about Abraham realized that he was a pilgrim there. He was wandering around because his vision was somewhere else. His homeland was somewhere else. And so when you think about the application to us, we need to seek God's guidance here. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. This probably was a prayer, the way this was written. It's asking God for guidance. And then a realization that this is not our home either. We're here for a short time. You think about, our life and how many years we're here versus time, and it's really not that long of a time that we're here on this earth. And so we think about, we often think about what we need to live is here on the earth, but really it's not. And as this song suggests, it says this land is barren. There's nothing here that we really need. There's things we have to live, but there's nothing on this earth that we really have to have. We're definitely not going to take any of it with us, as we well know. So this song suggests that this land is barren, has really nothing to offer, but God supplies what we need. And so he does. And it points to our weaknesses, but it shows our dependence on a God who protects and provides what we need. How did God feed the children of Israel? He fed them with manna every day, right? But what does he say here? He talks about bread of heaven. The manna fell down from the sky, and that's how they really looked at it. A lot of times, every night, the manna fell from heaven. They gathered it in the morning, what they needed for the day. And so he talks here about bread of heaven, or spiritual food that we need, and it provides our nourishment and for our growth. If you look over in John chapter 16 and verse 13, it said, however, when he, the Spirit of truth has come, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak. He will tell you things to come. And he talks about, where are we going to get this truth that we need, this bread of heaven? Well, it's going to come from God. That's where truth comes from. And then Jesus was asked for a sign like the manna from God to the Israelites. And Jesus said to the people that asked that question, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger. He who believes in me shall never thirst. Jesus said, I'm the source of that bread, right? Or that truth that they needed. Okay, let's look at verse 2. He said, open now the crystal fountain, whence the healing waters flow. Let the fiery, cloudy pillar lead me all my journey through. Strong deliver, be thou still my strength and shield. Strong deliver, be thou still my strength and shield. What happens to us if we don't have water? We die, right? So you can live a while without food, but it's a shorter time that you can live without water. And so if we don't have water, we're going to die. What did God do? I mean, we're all familiar with the stories of the children of Israel leading them out into the wilderness. What was the one thing they complained about most? Water, right? You brought us out here to die. We're going to starve to death. There's no water to drink. And so, God would, he would provide what they needed for them. He would provide water for them as they wandered in the wilderness, making their way to the promised land. And so he provided guidance. What does it say here in this verse? A fiery cloudy pillar that lead me on my journey through. When the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness, when they look up, what do they see? They see a cloud guiding them by day. If they looked up at night, what did they see? They saw that pillar of fire. And so what does that tell them? Hey, God is with us, right? God's watching over us. God's protecting us. God's leading us. And that was the symbol or something that they could visually see. And so they could always look up and have assurance that God was with them. And he demonstrated his strength and his power many, many times every day, number one, by providing manna, but providing water. When people came to attack them, he provided protection. And like I said, these pillars and clouds guided them. And when you think about deliverance, well, we've been delivered from sin, but there's still dangers out there. And so we need God's strength. We need God's protection against those dangers. And we can pray for those things. We pray for those. We pray for others that they would have those. Think about the model prayer. One of the things in the model prayer is, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, right? So we ask for this deliverance that he's talking about here, just as God provided deliverance to the children of Israel. Okay, we're now at third down, verse 3. When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my ancient fears subside. Bear me through the swelling current, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises I will ever give to thee. Songs of praises I will ever give to thee. Think about this verse and the children of Israel. Where were they? They got up to the Jordan River. They're ready to cross over into the promised land. They've spent 40 years in the wilderness because of their unbelief. And now they're at the point of going into the promised land. And here stands this river, Jordan River, and he talks about they're standing on the verge of Jordan, on the edge of Jordan, and there's fears. He talks about the swelling current. Here's a rapid stream rolling in front of them. What does God do? God stops that river, right? And they walk across on dry ground. They're protected. They're delivered across. And you think, well, was this an anxious moment or a fearful moment for the children of Israel? Having seen all that God had done for them, sure it was. I mean, they were still, all the things that God had provided and the things they had seen, there was some fear in their hearts as they went across, knowing that what was ahead, that they had many battles ahead of them that they would have to fight. But God's power took them through and got them to the promised land. And we talked in the class this morning, all of us one day are going to face death. And we talked about hope. And, that helps when you see people who have hope. They don't fear death near as much as people who have no hope. Barry mentioned the atheists, and I've heard that. I can't remember who it is. I've heard that expression as well. The guy says, God, if there is a God, have mercy on my soul, or something, if I have a soul, or something along that line that this famous atheist is quoted. Well, death tends to change people's perspective a little bit. They can spout a lot of things about life and about what they want to do, but then when it gets to that point, they start to sober up and get a little bit more serious about when they know that they're facing their end. But when you see Christians who know they have hope, they know there's something better on the other side, and it's almost a time of rejoicing rather than a time of sadness for them. And so it's something that we can think about when we look at these songs, and we know the stories behind them. The children of Israel went in and took the promised land just like God told them that he would give them. And we too have that promised land that God has said he will provide for us. Look in Revelation chapter 15, verses 3 and 4. It says, "They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the saints. Who shall not fear you, O Lord, and glorify thy name? For you alone are holy, for all the nations shall come and worship before you, and your judgments have been manifest." And so, what are we going to do on that other side? What does he say we're going to do here? He says we're going to sing, right? We're going to sing this song about Moses, and we're going to sing this song about the Lamb or Jesus. And that's how we will spend eternity in praising God in songs. So I think it's a really marvelous thing that we do when we sing. And I think sometimes we really need to focus about the words and the messages of those songs, because, the people who wrote these are, very, very talented to be able to take a thought and to put it down into words, and then somebody put it into, write music to it that we can sing together, and we can encourage one another, and we can be encouraged by the songs that we sing. And so I hope this gives us some encouragement. It was based on something that was real. The children of Israel had to go in and take the promised land, and the events that as they unfolded for them is something that really happened, and we see how God providing for them. We've looked in the Old Testament. We know that Moses, at the very end of his life, left a song for the children of Israel to sing. But why did he leave them that song? It was something it was a way for them to remember all the things that God had done for them. It was a way for them to teach their children about the things that God had done for them. So we sing an invitation song at the end of our services. And why do we do that? Well, we do that. Most of these songs have a message about encouraging and about a message of being prepared. And so the song David selected this afternoon, "Don't You Want to Be Ready?" Well, that's a question, right? And so it's an opportunity for us to think about our life, and are we prepared? I know Russell's class, Patty was looking at the 5 wise and foolish virgins. That's what they were talking about this morning, and that was one of what's the theme of this parable? Well, it's being prepared, having made the right preparation. So if you're here this afternoon and need our help, we certainly want to help you if we can. We want you to take advantage of that as we stand and sing.